The heavy oak door shook on its hinges as it slammed behind him, the echo rolling through the marble hallway like thunder. Liam Hale didn't flinch. He only stood still for a moment, staring at the bright sun spilling across the front steps of the mansion he had lived in for almost a decade. Behind him, through the thick wooden door, he could still hear her voice, sharp, triumphant, and full of the kind of anger that didn't need a reason anymore. "Don't come back. Not ever." Vanessa Whitlock's words carried through the cracks of the door, edged with spite. A gust of wind pushed at Liam's coat as he stepped down the front stairs. The estate grounds stretched around him, long drive lined with trimmed hedges, fountains sparkling in the noon light, tall windows reflecting the sweep of green fields. He knew every inch of this place, every stone, every path, every shadow beneath the veranda. But now he walked as if each step was borrowed. His bag, half-packed, thrown together under her shouting, hung from his shoulder. It felt lighter than it should, as though even his belongings knew he didn't truly need them. Liam didn't look back. If he did, he wasn't sure he could keep the silence he held inside. Behind the door, Vanessa was still hurling insults to no one in particular, her heels clicking on the marble tiles. "Ungrateful nobody. I should have done this years ago." Liam didn't answer. He never did. Not because he couldn't, but because he already knew something she didn't. A secret that could change everything. He reached the long gravel drive where the chauffeur usually waited. Today there was no one. Vanessa had probably dismissed them all to make the moment more dramatic. She liked scenes, moments where she could feel powerful, moments where she could make someone small. Especially him. But Liam kept walking, calm, steady, as though he were simply leaving for an afternoon errand. The clouds were low and heavy, their shadows crawling across the open land. He listened to the crunch of gravel under his boots, letting the sound fill the quiet she had forced on him. Vanessa's voice had chased him through the mansion for years. Sharp commands, unfair blame, cold dismissal. It still rang faintly in his ears, but for the first time, it didn't sting. Not the way it once had. At the end of the drive, he paused beside the iron gates. The estate stretched out behind him, beautiful and enormous, the kind of place people dreamed about but never touched. Vanessa had always treated it like her kingdom, ruling it with entitlement and vanity. She believed it was hers, entirely and unquestionably. But she was wrong. Liam reached into his coat pocket and touched the folded document resting there. The paper edges were crisp against his fingers. He had memorized every line of it long before today. The truth sat quietly in that envelope, patient, like it had been waiting for the right moment. A soft breeze rustled the trees overhead. He let it wash over him, cooling the tension in his shoulders. Vanessa didn't know. She had never known. Liam stepped through the iron gate and onto the public road. The world outside the estate felt wider, louder, more alive. Carts rattled along the road. A cyclist pedaled past. Birds perched on telephone wires. It was strange. After living under the heavy chandeliers and echoing corridors of Whitlock Mansion, the ordinary world felt almost comforting. He started walking, keeping his pace slow. Relieved. Quietly relieved. Behind him, a window slammed open. Vanessa's voice shrieked out across the grounds. "Don't think you can crawl back. You're nothing without me." Liam paused only long enough to close his eyes. Not because the words hurt, but because they didn't. Not anymore. Her anger felt far away now, like a storm moving off across the hills. He didn't turn around. He simply kept walking, heading toward the row of tall pines at the bend in the road. He knew that soon, very soon, Vanessa would realize the truth. She would learn what he had learned months ago. She would discover that the mansion she guarded like a crown jewel wasn't legally hers at all. That the estate she flaunted, the property she boasted about, the inheritance she claimed, belonged to him. Every acre, every stone, every key. He had kept the secret quiet out of respect for the man who raised him. The former owner had trusted Liam with his final wishes, wishes Vanessa had chosen to ignore. Liam stopped at the edge of the road, where the shadows of the pines stretched long beneath the afternoon sun. He turned, just once, to look at the mansion far behind him. The grand windows glinted, but the place no longer felt towering. It looked smaller now. Or maybe he had finally grown beyond it. He adjusted the strap of his bag and breathed deeply. The air smelled like earth and pine sap, cleaner than anything inside the mansion's marble walls. Soon enough, Vanessa would discover what she had truly done. She hadn't thrown out a nobody. She had thrown out the owner. And when the papers were finally brought to her door, when the truth was placed in her trembling hands, Liam wondered if the slam of the mansion door would echo just as loudly for her. The morning sun had barely climbed above the roofs of the small town when Liam pushed open the door of Harper and Wren legal office. The brass bell above the frame gave a tired ring, the kind that suggested it had hung there longer than most businesses on the street. Inside, dust floated in the air like soft gold, drifting between shelves stacked with old case files and leather-bound books. Mr. Alden Wren, the estate attorney, stood from his desk the moment he saw Liam. The older man's gray hair was combed back neatly, but his eyes held a sharpness that never dimmed. He had been waiting. "You're here," Wren said, voice low but steady. "I thought you might come today." Liam nodded once and took a seat across from him, resting his bag at his feet. He looked tired, but calm, far calmer than anyone who had just been thrown out of a mansion. Wren reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick envelope, the same one Liam had studied again and again in secret. The attorney placed it between them, tapping it once with a careful finger. "This," Wren said, "is the final version of Gregory Whitlock's will. The version your stepmother refuses to acknowledge exists." Liam's jaw tightened slightly. Vanessa Whitlock. Even the name felt heavy. Wren opened the envelope and slid the papers out. The old handwriting was smooth and slanted, written by a man who had spent his life making decisions that others only talked about. "Your father," Wren continued, "was very clear about his wishes. He left the entire estate, house, land, accounts, and all holdings to you. Not a piece to Vanessa. She thinks everything belongs to her," Liam said quietly. "She believes what she wants to believe," Wren answered. "But the law doesn't bend for pride." The attorney turned the document so Liam could see the highlighted sections. The words rose from the page like they had been waiting years to speak aloud. "I leave the full title and ownership of Whitlock Estate to my son, Liam Hale Whitlock." Liam let those words settle inside him again, even though he had read them before. They still felt unreal, heavy and liberating all at once. Wren watched him carefully. "Gregory trusted you, Liam. He believed you were the only one who understood responsibility, the only one who wouldn't let the estate rot under selfish hands." Liam swallowed. "He told me once that the house was more than a building, that it was a legacy," Wren finished. "He said the same to me." A quiet moment passed. Outside the office window, a wagon clattered by, carrying crates of fruit to the market. Normal life, moving on without knowing that someone's world was shifting in a seismic way. Wren gathered the papers again. "It's time to make everything official. I'll file notice with the county. Vanessa will be informed in writing. She'll know the truth soon." "How long before she gets the documents?"
"A day.
"Maybe 2. Liam nodded slowly, though something in his eyes darkened. Not fear, but a sadness that he tried to tuck away. "She'll rage." "Oh, she will," Wren said, almost wearily. "She built her world on the idea that everything must revolve around her. This will knock the floor out from underneath her." Liam leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling for a moment. "I didn't want it to come to this. I just wanted peace." "And now you'll have it," Wren replied. "You just don't realize it yet." The attorney folded the will neatly and placed it back into its envelope. He slid it toward Liam, but Liam shook his head. "You keep it safe," he said. "If I carry it, she'll find a way to get her hands on it. Or destroy it." Wren gave a faint smile. "Wise choice." He locked the envelope inside a drawer, turning the key with a soft click. The sound felt final, solid. The sound of a future taking shape. Liam stood. The sunlight through the tall office windows cast long shadows across his features, sharpening the quiet resolve in his expression. What happens now? He asked.
Now.
Ren replied, walking him to the door. You let the truth do its work. You've spent years silent under that roof. This time, you won't need to raise your voice. The law will speak for you. Liam stepped outside, the bell chiming behind him as the door closed. The street was lively, vendors calling out prices, neighbors chatting, dogs weaving between horses. But Liam felt slightly apart from it all, like he was standing still while the world moved around him. He walked slowly toward town square, thinking of the mansion miles away, its tall windows, its winding halls, the way Vanessa's voice once echoed through it like an order to breathe differently. Soon, that house would no longer be her kingdom, and she had pushed out the rightful owner with her own hands. Liam exhaled, the cold air curling from his breath. He knew Vanessa. He knew the fire in her, the fury that would rise like a storm once she learned the truth. But the fear that once lived inside him had gone quiet. In its place was something steadier.
Strength.
A carriage rolled past, kicking dust into the air. Liam watched it fade down the road, then turned toward the distant hills that led back toward the estate he would soon reclaim. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. Time was already moving in his favor. Behind him, in the office, Ren pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began drafting the official notice that would change everything. And miles away, in the glittering rooms of Whitlock Mansion, Vanessa Whitlock still believed she owned every inch of the world she walked on. The afternoon sun stretched long stripes of gold across the dirt road as Liam walked away from the town, heading toward the small room he had rented behind the old carpenter's shop. It wasn't much, just a bed, a stove, and a window that squeaked when the wind pushed it. But after years in a mansion where every breath felt controlled, the place felt strangely open. For the first time in years, he could breathe without waiting for someone to judge how he did it. He set his small bag on the wooden floor and took a seat on the edge of the bed. The springs groaned beneath him, but the sound felt honest.
Real.
He rested his hands on his knees and lowered his head. He was tired. Not the kind of tired sleep could fix, but the kind that came from years of silence. Years of swallowing words while Vanessa stamped her name across every inch of the mansion. And now he was free of her walls, but not of the weight she left behind. A knock rattled the thin door. Liam? You set linen all right, called Mr. Turner, the carpenter. Liam stood and opened the door. Turner, a broad man with sawdust clinging to his shirt, looked him over with simple, unintrusive concern. I'm fine, Liam said. Thank you. Turner nodded. Well, if you need anything, tools, help fixin' that broken window latch, just holler. I will. When Turner walked off, Liam returned to the bed. He stared at his hands, calloused, steady. Hands that had worked the estate grounds, repaired roofs, shoveled snow, tended to sick horses. Hands that had kept the mansion running while Vanessa claimed every bit of praise. Now those same hands sat idle in a room that smelled faintly of pine. He leaned back on the pillow, letting his eyes close. For years, Vanessa had threatened him with the same sharp words. You're nothing without this house. But the truth was beginning to feel different. He didn't need the mansion. The mansion needed him. Across town, Vanessa Whitlock stood on the mansion's grand balcony wearing a silk robe that shimmered under the afternoon sun. She held a glass of wine between manicured fingers, lifting it with satisfaction as she looked over the estate grounds. In her mind, victory tasted sweet. She paced along the balcony with a smug smile, speaking to the maid who hurried behind her. You see, Clara, the house feels lighter now that he's gone. There was always something dull about him. She waved her hand dismissively. He dragged the atmosphere down. Clara kept her eyes low. Yes, ma'am. And really, Vanessa leaned on the railing. Did you see how he walked out? Like some tragic hero. She laughed sharply. He should be grateful I let him stay as long as I did. Clara didn't answer. Vanessa sipped her wine with a flourish, tilting her chin high. I always win. People forget that. But he learned it today. Her smile widened at the thought. Liam didn't know the words she spoke, but he felt them all the same. The echo of her arrogance, the shadow of her voice. The kind of shadow that didn't disappear just because the door shut behind him. He rose from the bed and stepped outside. The air was crisp, cooler than the day before. He walked toward the fields beyond town until the noise faded. There, in the open grass, he let the quiet settle over him like a blanket. Freedom was strange. It didn't shout, it whispered. And the whisper said he could choose what came next. He took a deep breath, letting the wind pull through his hair. He looked up at the sky, wide, clear, unowned by anyone. Maybe this was what his father had wanted him to feel. Maybe this was why the will had been written the way it was, why everything belonged to him, even if he hadn't stepped into that truth yet. As he stood in the fading light, a group of townspeople passed along the main road. Liam heard faint laughter drifting through the air. That Whitlock boy finally got tossed out. Took her long enough. She runs that mansion better than he ever could. Liam didn't turn. Their words pricked him, but only faintly, not like they once would have. Not like Vanessa intended them to. He remained still until their voices faded. Then he walked back toward his room. Inside, he lit the small oil lamp on his table. Its glow wasn't grand like the chandeliers in the mansion, but it warmed the space gently. He sat, folding his hands again. He had nothing but the clothes on his back, a few coins, and the truth that Vanessa didn't know was coming for her. But that truth was stronger than gold. Stronger than years of insults. Stronger than the mansion's marble floors and velvet chairs. A quiet knock came to his door. Turner again, holding a small loaf of bread. "Thought you might want supper," the carpenter said simply. Liam accepted it with quiet gratitude. "Thank you." As the door closed, he sat on the bed and broke the bread in half. The taste was plain but warm, the kind of warmth that came from kindness and not ownership. He looked toward the window, where the night sky stretched wide and endless. Vanessa might have believed she won. She might have stood in her mansion with a glass raised high. But the estate was his. Every brick, every field, every locked room she thought she commanded. And soon, very soon, her victory would turn to dust. For now, Liam ate his simple supper in peace, letting the silence tell him what he already knew. Life on the outside was hard, but it was also the first breath of something new. And freedom, real freedom, always began this way. The woman strutted through town the way she always did, chin high, heels sharp against the cobblestones, a smirk that dared anyone to question her place atop the grand estate on the hill. For days she had soaked in her victory, bragging to anyone within earshot that she had removed the dead weight from her mansion. But today the air felt different. At first, she didn't notice. She breezed into the bakery, fully expecting the usual eager flattery. But the baker's wife only offered a stiff smile, her eyes flitting away as if she knew something and wasn't sure whether to say it.
Odd.
She moved on to the tailor. He normally bowed slightly when she entered. Today, he simply nodded and went back to stitching, quiet as thread through fabric. Her lips tightened. By the time she reached the market square, she could feel it, eyes drifting toward her, whispers rising like wind around alleyways. She slowed her steps. A pair of old women hunched near the fountain leaned close, their voices low but not low enough. "Are you sure?" one asked. "That's what I heard," the other replied. The mansion might not belong to her after all, not fully. The woman's heart gave a startled, annoyed kick. She spun toward them. "Excuse me?" The women jolted, wide-eyed. One fumbled with her shawl, suddenly fascinated by its pattern. "Oh, nothing, dear. Just market talk." "Baseless, I'm sure." The other chimed in too quickly. The woman's jaw clenched. Market talk. She hated that phrase. Nothing good ever began with it. She continued walking, more briskly now, her irritation simmering beneath her polished exterior. At a fruit stall, two young men whispered as she passed. "Did you hear the lawyer was in town again?" "No kidding?" Thought everything was settled with her. Maybe not. Her pulse hitched. The same lawyer who'd spoken so coldly when he delivered her inheritance. The same one who had barely looked her in the eye. The same one who had seemed distant, almost apologetic. She dismissed the thought with an angry flick of her wrist. There was no reason to worry. None at all. Still, the murmurs followed her, from shop to shop, street to street. Whispers curling around corners like smoke she couldn't outrun. The real owner. Someone else named in the will. Not who she thinks. Every fragment snagged her confidence, like barbs. By the time she reached the edge of town, she was walking stiffly, fingers curled around her handbag, breath shallow with annoyance. Or was it fear? She refused to admit the latter. Up at the mansion, the afternoon sun glared hard against the windows. For the first time, she felt the house looming rather than standing proudly behind her. Could the rumors be true? Her stomach twisted. The man she had kicked out, he had barely argued, barely spoken. He had simply taken the humiliation, offered her a calm look she hadn't understood, and walked away.
Too calm.
Too silent. And now, whispers were unraveling her certainty thread by thread. She stepped inside the mansion and slammed the door behind her, but the sound didn't settle her. Instead, it echoed through the grand hall, hollow in a way she had never noticed before. She stood there, breath uneven, as one sharp thought pierced through her defense. What if she hadn't won anything at all? The knock came just after noon, 3 sharp raps that echoed through the mansion's long hallways. The woman froze on the staircase, fingers tightening on the polished railing. No one knocked like that. Not neighbors. Not servants. Not anyone who came with good news. She waited, hoping the visitor would simply go away. They didn't. The knock came again, firm, impatient. Her pulse skittered. She descended the remaining steps and made her way to the front door, forcing her expression into controlled confidence. But the moment she opened it, her breath caught. The lawyer stood there, black suit, stiff posture, expression carved from stone. The same man who had given her the estate documents. The same man who had avoided her eyes. "Good afternoon," he said, though his tone carried none of the warmth the words suggested. He removed his hat. "We need to speak." A prickle of cold worry crept across her spine. "About what?" she asked, trying to sound bored. He didn't humor her act. He stepped inside without waiting to be invited, shutting the door behind him. The house suddenly felt much smaller. "I have come to deliver a formal notice," he said, opening his leather case. "Certain matters concerning the estate have changed." Her stomach tightened. Changed how? He paused, choosing his words with the careful precision of a man who knew the ground beneath them was dangerous. "New information has surfaced regarding the rightful heir," he said. "It appears the distribution of assets may not have been complete. A review is required." Until then, he handed her a sealed envelope. "You are instructed to refrain from making any financial or structural changes to the property." Her face drained of color. "What do you mean review?" she demanded. "You told me everything was settled." He finally met her eyes, and what she saw there made her chest feel hollow. "Regret." "Circumstances were unique," he replied, "and certain provisions in the will were not disclosed at the time." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "Provisions?" she whispered. "What provisions?" The lawyer didn't answer. Instead, he reached for his case again, pulling out a second paper. "This is a warning, ma'am. Failure to comply could result in legal consequences." Legal consequences. The word struck harder than a slap. This must be a mistake," she stammered. "Someone is lying. Someone is trying to take what's mine." A sharpness entered the lawyer's gaze. "Nothing in this mansion was ever fully yours," he said quietly, "and you were advised to treat its residents with respect." Her breath caught. She felt the edges of panic clawing at her composure. The resident she had expelled. The one who left without protest. The one she had mocked as powerless. She suddenly felt every rumor from town tightening around her like ropes. The lawyer stepped back toward the door. "You will be contacted again when the next stage begins." Next stage. Her voice cracked, thin and desperate. "There's more?"
He didn't respond.
He simply placed his hat back on, tipped it once in stiff formality, and walked out. The door closed with a heavy thud. The woman stood in the silent hallway, envelope trembling in her grip, feeling for the first time that the mansion she had claimed so boldly was slipping through her fingers, taken not by force, but by truths she had never bothered to look for. And somewhere out in the world, the man she had discarded carried a secret she was suddenly terrified to face. The mansion felt different the next morning, quieter, heavier, as though the walls themselves were waiting for something to unravel. The woman noticed at the moment she stepped into the hall. Usually, the servants jumped at her presence, offering greetings she never returned. But today, they barely looked up. Her heels clicked sharply on the marble floor. No one hurried. No one bowed their head. A simmer of irritation rose in her. "Is breakfast ready?" she demanded, expecting the usual scramble. But Mrs. Hawthorne, the head housekeeper, usually stiff and obedient, lifted her chin with a calm that bordered on defiance. "It will be served shortly," she said. "We're running a bit behind." Behind? They were never behind. The woman narrowed her eyes. "Why?" Mrs. Hawthorne hesitated only a second. "A message arrived early this morning. From the lawyer." The woman's throat tightened. "And what did he say?" "That someone may have been wronged," the housekeeper replied plainly, "and that the will is being reevaluated." A few of the maids nearby paused their dusting, listening carefully. Their eyes held something she had never seen before. Hope. She forced a laugh. "You all know this place belongs to me. Don't let gossip turn your heads." Mrs. Hawthorne didn't respond, but the silence felt like a judgment. The woman walked to the dining room, unsettled. When she sat down, the footman placed her tea in front of her so gently it was almost suspicious. She frowned. "What is this?" she asked. "I said I wanted Earl Grey." "It is Earl Grey," he replied. But his tone was wrong. Not fearful, not submissive. Neutral, balanced, like he no longer cared what she thought. A flutter of unease danced in her stomach. Later that afternoon, she passed the servants' quarters and heard whispers, low voices, hurried but unmistakably excited. "He was always decent to us," someone murmured. "Quiet, yes, but good-hearted." And she threw him out like he was nothing. The woman froze, heart lurching.
They were talking about him.
She leaned closer, barely breathing. "And if the will favors him," another voice whispered, "we should prepare for changes. Best to stay on the side of the rightful heir." Rightful heir. The words stabbed through her. Her grip tightened on the doorframe until her knuckles whitened. She backed away before they noticed her, her pulse hammering in her ears. The final blow came when she entered the study later that evening. Two of the gardeners were there, men who normally avoided stepping foot inside. "What are you doing?" she snapped. "You don't belong in here." They exchanged glances. "We were cleaning," one said, "for when he returns." She felt her breath catch. "He returns?" "Mr. Ward," the man said simply. His name hung in the air like an accusation. Her voice came out thin. "He's not coming back." "For now," the gardener said, unbothered. "But if the lawyer's message is correct, this house might not remain yours much longer." She stared at them, stunned by their bluntness. The gardeners returned to work, dusting, adjusting furniture, making space as though preparing for someone important. Someone deserving. Someone she had treated like dirt. A tremor of fear crawled up her spine. She had believed the staff respected her, obeyed her, needed her, but now she saw the truth. Their loyalty had never been to her. It had always been to him. And as whispers continued to ripple through the mansion, the power she once held began slipping, quietly and efficiently, into hands she no longer controlled. By the next morning, the woman had made up her mind. If the staff dared to shift their loyalty, if the lawyer dared to question her claim, if he dared to stand silently in the shadows, letting rumors swirl, she would remind everyone exactly who held power in this town. Or so she believed. She ordered an extravagant party with the kind of speed only desperation could ignite. Invitations went out by noon, thick cream envelopes sealed with gold wax. The messaging was loud and clear. The lady of the mansion invites you to celebrate her continued ownership of the estate. The wording alone screamed insecurity. By evening, lanterns lit the gardens, musicians set up on the lawn, and tables overflowed with food. She spared no expense. Flowers from 3 towns over, champagne imported from the coast, musicians dressed in crisp white vests. If she wanted the world to think she was still untouchable, she planned to blind them with decadence. Guests poured in, dazzled by the display. She smiled, floating through the crowd with the grace of someone trying far too hard. "Welcome," she said sweetly. "I know there have been unnecessary rumors. Tonight is proof. The estate is still mine." A woman in a red dress whispered behind her fan, "She's frightened. Look at her." Another replied, "I heard the real heir has the will on his side." The hostess smiled wider, teeth clenched. She ordered the musicians to play louder. As the evening grew noisier, she took the stage in the center of the garden. She called for silence, though her heart was beating fast enough that she worried someone might hear it. "Everyone," she announced dramatically, "I want to address the foolish stories being passed around." People exchanged glances. "I assure you," she said, lifting her chin, "that man, who briefly lived here, has no claim whatsoever. He was a pity case. A stray taken in. Nothing more." Some in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned in. "And," she added with a brittle laugh, "he's already proving himself pathetic. Look at him, wandering the town, as if he belongs anywhere near this estate. I hope he enjoys his little taste of freedom. It's the most he'll ever have." The crowd didn't laugh. Not a single person. Instead, murmurs rippled through the guests, disbelief, irritation, and something colder. The hostess swallowed hard. She had expected applause. She got judgment. Later, when conversations turned quiet, she overheard 2 wealthy merchants whispering beneath a lantern. "She mocks him publicly," one muttered. "Yet everyone knows he never spoke ill of her." "She's trying to look powerful," the other replied, "but it smells of desperation." The words hit her like a slap. Desperate? Her? She lifted her glass higher, acting unaffected, but her hand trembled. Halfway through the night, she noticed a familiar figure near the gates, him. He did not enter. He did not approach. He simply stood there, silent, watching the mansion blaze with light and noise. His posture calm, steady, unbothered. Almost amused. She felt heat crawl up her neck. She raised her voice sharply, loud enough for guests near the gate to hear. "Oh, look! The stray has returned, probably hoping to sneak back into my home." The guests turned to see him, but he didn't react. He didn't shout. He didn't defend himself. He simply tipped his head slightly, as though giving a polite farewell, and walked away into the night. His quiet dignity made her mockery look childish. Someone whispered behind her, "She keeps trying to embarrass him, but she's embarrassing herself." Her face flushed red. Her plan to reclaim control was not working. Worse, every move she made only proved how much control she had already lost. When the last guests left and the lanterns dimmed, she stood alone on the balcony, the mansion silent around her. The servants hadn't stayed late to clean. They hadn't asked how she wanted things arranged. They had gone home early, without fear of punishment. Her fingers dug into the rail. Everything she had built on arrogance and intimidation was slipping. And for the first time, the truth dawned on her. Wealth could be flaunted. Power could be pretended. But respect, once lost, could not be forced back. "If you'd like to continue, I'm ready to write." The next morning arrived quiet and gray, the sky heavy with clouds that seemed to mirror the mansion's mood. The party was over, the laughter long gone, and the air around the estate felt strangely hollow, like the house itself was tired of pretending. She woke early, still in yesterday's makeup, her head aching from stress rather than wine. She pulled back the curtains, hoping for calm. Instead, she froze. He was there, walking the edge of the estate grounds with a notebook in hand. No hesitation. No sneaking. Just steady footsteps across land she believed belonged to her. A chill ran through her spine. Outside, he worked in silence, dressed plainly, dark jacket, rolled sleeves, firm posture. He paused at the old stables, noting the repairs that had been ignored. Then he studied the garden walls, running his fingers along the weathered stone.
He was not trespassing.
He moved with the confidence of someone inspecting his own property. The gardeners noticed first. "Morning, sir," one said, tipping his hat instinctively. She noticed that too.
"Sir."
"Not ma'am. Not even miss." He answered them kindly, asked simple questions, and wrote quietly in his notebook. His presence felt calm, but also unshakably certain. Like he wasn't measuring the land, he was reclaiming it. She watched from the window, anxiety tightening her chest. Why did he look so comfortable here? Why did the staff treat him like he was in charge? Why did he carry that notebook? What exactly was he counting? Eventually, she forced herself outside, pretending confidence. She strutted across the lawn in a silk robe, calling out sharply, "What do you think you're doing?" He looked up slowly, his expression unreadable. "Checking the property," he said simply. "As if you have the right," she snapped. He didn't raise his voice.
He didn't argue.
He just held her gaze for a long, steady moment until she felt her stomach twist. Then he pointed to a broken section of the gate. "This needs fixing before the next storm," he said. Her face burned. "You don't give orders here." "I didn't give one," he replied. "I made a note." He turned and continued down the fence line. That calmness, unshakable, unbothered, only made her more nervous. Servants whispered behind her, thinking she couldn't hear. "He's the rightful heir, isn't he?" "I think so. Why else would the lawyer be around?" "Maybe she won't be mistress of the estate much longer." Her jaw tightened. She couldn't stand it. She stormed toward him again. "Stop walking the property like you own it." He closed his notebook with one quiet motion. "I don't need to pretend." She opened her mouth to argue, but something in his voice stopped her. Something firm, final, true. For the first time, she saw not the man she kicked out, but the man who might actually hold the future of the estate in his hands. He left the grounds just before noon, heading toward town, the notebook tucked under his arm. She watched him go, heart thudding. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't threatened. He hadn't even looked angry. And that scared her more than anything. Because men who were powerless made noise. But men who had already won? They walked away quietly, with a notebook full of secrets she wasn't meant to see. The morning sunlight spilled weakly through the tall windows of the mansion, but it brought no warmth. She sat at the long dining table, stirring a cup of cold tea she hadn't touched. The servants moved quietly around her, too quietly. Their eyes slipped away when she glanced at them, as if they knew something she didn't. And then the knock came. 3 sharp, deliberate taps. Not polite, not hesitant. Official. Her breath caught. The butler opened the front door, and the lawyer stepped inside with a leather briefcase and a face carved from stone. "Good morning," he said calmly. "I'm here on behalf of the estate's legal heir." Her fingers tightened around the teacup. He entered behind the lawyer, silent, steady, not triumphant, but resolute. He said nothing, only stood to the side like a shadow of authority. "Well, what is this?" she asked, rising too quickly. The lawyer opened his briefcase, with a clean click. "Consider this your formal notice," he said. "According to the will, all property, rights, and financial control transfer to him effective today." Her heartbeat hammered. "No," she whispered. "That's impossible. I have the deeds. I've managed this estate for years." The lawyer shook his head, sliding papers across the table with a smooth, practiced motion. "You never owned the estate," he said. "You were only given temporary residence. A courtesy from the previous owner. The true heir has the full legal authority to reclaim the property. These are court-stamped documents, final and irreversible." She stared at the pages, but the words blurred. Her voice cracked as she tried to smile, tried to pretend this was some joke. This can't be real. You can't just walk in and... "He isn't walking in," the lawyer said sharply. "He is taking possession of what has always been his." The servants stopped working. Some nodded quietly. Some looked relieved. Support had shifted, fully, undeniably. She backed up a step, feeling the room tilt. "This is my home," she hissed, desperation rising in her chest. "You can't just take it away." He finally spoke. "It was never yours," he said softly. "You only treated it like it was." His calmness broke her more than shouting ever could. The lawyer tapped one final document. "You have 72 hours to vacate the property. Refusal will result in legal removal." Her breath stuttered. 72 hours. Her world shrank to a single, dizzying moment. The mansion, the luxury, the power she flaunted, the pride she clung to.
Gone.
All of it slipping away in quiet, measured words. She looked at him, hoping, begging for some sign of mercy. But he wasn't cruel. He wasn't gloating. He was simply done being silent. And that was the moment she realized. She had absolutely no power left. Only the truth. And the truth had finally arrived in black ink and stamped seals.
If.
The mansion felt different now. Heavier, colder, no longer bending to her voice. She walked through the halls with stiff shoulders, but every step echoed with a truth she had tried so long to bury. Whispers followed her everywhere. Servants paused mid-task, exchanging glances she couldn't decipher. She tried to raise her chin, tried to keep the illusion alive, but illusions crack when they lose an audience. By noon, the first blow fell. The accountant, someone she had barely remembered existed, arrived with a thick folder. "These are your outstanding debts," he said simply. Her mouth went dry. "My what?" He placed the papers in front of her.
Bills.
Final notices. Outstanding balances. The lifestyle she bragged about had been held together with credit, loans, and charm she didn't actually possess. The accountant's tone remained steady. "The estate will not cover these. They are your responsibility alone." She sank into a chair, her legs too weak to hold her. Next came the staff, those she had bullied, underpaid, or dismissed without care. One by one, they approached him instead of her. They delivered reports, expense lists, records she had hidden. They exposed every corner she kept dusted in lies. She forged signatures, the gardener admitted, showing proof. She redirected funds, the cook said quietly. She threatened to fire anyone who questioned her. The maid added, trembling as she handed over a ledger she had secretly copied. Every confession struck her like a blow. He didn't raise his voice, didn't look pleased. He simply nodded, steady and calm, letting the truth sort itself. She tried to interrupt, but the lawyer held up a hand. "Let them speak. This has been long overdue." Her breath hitched. Long overdue. The words burned. By evening, the kitchen, once her stage of dominance, became her courtroom. She stood in the center while the staff formed a loose circle, not attacking her, but no longer protecting her either. The hierarchy she created had collapsed. "I gave you all work," she snapped, her voice shaking. The housekeeper stepped forward gently, but with steel in her eyes. "You gave orders. There is a difference." Her throat tightened. "You lied to us," another added. "You said you owned this place. You spent money that wasn't yours. You treated him like a nobody." She looked toward him, her last hope, but he stood by the doorway, silent, unreadable, arms crossed. Not angry, just watching the truth settle. And for the first time, she felt something sharper than fear. She felt shame. Real shame. The kind that doesn't leave room for excuses. "Enough," she whispered, voice breaking. I didn't mean for it to go this far. But lies have weight." And hers finally crushed her. The lawyer stepped forward, placing a final packet of documents on the table. "These are the financial audits," he said. "They confirm unauthorized spending, forged approvals, and debt hidden from the estate. Your access to all funds is revoked effective immediately." Her breath came shallow. "Then what am I supposed to do?" she whispered. The lawyer exchanged a glance with a true air. "You will leave," he said gently. "With what is yours. Nothing more." Silence filled the room, heavy and final. Her life of pride, cruelty, and showmanship had collapsed in a single day, under paperwork, truth, and the quiet authority of the man she once dismissed. She stumbled back, gripping the edge of the counter as the reality washed over her. Her wealth was borrowed. Her power was fake. Her throne was paper. and it had all burned away. Her downfall was complete, yet no one cheered, no one mocked. They simply watched as the woman who claimed everything stood with nothing left to claim. The mansion was silent at dusk, its long halls washed in fading gold. Boxes sat half-packed in the foyer, her boxes, her clothes, her scattered life. She stood at the center of it all, trembling not from anger now, but from fear. The last 72 hours had crushed every illusion she ever held. Pride had drained away until nothing remained but desperation. She heard his footsteps before she saw him. Slow, steady, certain. He entered the foyer with the lawyer behind him, though he raised a hand, quietly dismissing the attorney. Whatever came next, he would face alone. She swallowed hard. "You came," she whispered. "I said I would," he replied simply. He wasn't cold, but he wasn't warm either. Just calm. Too calm for her comfort. She stepped closer. "I need to talk to you." He waited. Her voice cracked. "I want your forgiveness." His expression didn't move. "And why?" he asked gently. "Because you're sorry or because you're losing the mansion?" She flinched as if struck. "I'm not a monster," she said, voice shaking. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't know the truth. If I had known—" He cut in softly. "You would have treated me better?" She hesitated. That pause was her undoing. He exhaled slowly. "That's the problem. Kindness shouldn't depend on ownership." She stepped closer, hands trembling. "I can change. I will.
Just don't leave me like this.
Don't let me lose everything." He held her gaze for a long moment. Not harshly, not cruelly, just honestly. "You didn't lose everything," he said. "You lost what wasn't yours. And you lost the chance to keep hurting people." Her breath hitched. "I'm asking for forgiveness," she whispered again, voice breaking. "And I'm refusing to be manipulated again," he said quietly. "I don't hate you, but I won't let you use guilt to crawl back into power." Tears welled in her eyes. She had never cried in front of him before. She hated how it made her feel, small, exposed, human. I was scared," she said. "Always. That someone would take it all away. So I fought. I pushed. I lied. I'm sorry." He nodded once, a soft, almost sad motion. "I believe you're scared," he said. "But fear doesn't erase what you did." She stepped forward again, reaching for his hand. He stepped back. She froze. The rejection hit harder than any legal notice. His voice stayed gentle, but unbreakable. "Forgiveness isn't the same as letting you back into my life. It doesn't mean restoring your throne. It doesn't mean forgetting everything." Her tears spilled over. "So you hate me?" "No," he said. "I just finally see you clearly." Silence. The kind that ends chapters. She covered her face, shoulders shaking. He didn't comfort her. He didn't move closer. He didn't take advantage of her pain. He simply watched as the last of her control fell away. After a long moment, he turned toward the door. "You have until tomorrow to finish packing," he said. "Then the estate becomes what it was always meant to be." She lifted her head, eyes red and desperate. "Will you ever forgive me?" He paused at the doorway. "Maybe," he said, "but not today. And not like this." He left without another word. And for the first time in her life, she realized begging wouldn't save her. Only change would. The morning air was cool, almost unnaturally calm, like the world itself was holding its breath. The mansion stood tall before him, the stone walls glowing in the early sun. The same towering door she once slammed in his face now looked strangely different. Not threatening, not painful, just his. He walked up the steps slowly, each footstep echoing a memory. Every insult, every command, every "you don't belong here" that she had thrown at him. But today, none of it held power. At the top of the stairs, the door stood slightly open. The staff had left it that way on purpose. Out of respect, out of loyalty, out of truth. He reached for the handle. No hesitation. No bitterness. Just certainty. He pushed the door open. Light flooded the polished floors of the grand foyer. The chandeliers glimmered. The scent of fresh flowers filled the air, not the artificial fragrance she always demanded, but the soft, natural scent the staff had chosen for him. A quiet welcome. And standing there, near the staircase with her final suitcase at her feet, was her. For once, she didn't try to hide her emotions. Her face was pale, her eyes tired from a night without sleep. She looked at him not with arrogance, not with anger, but with the hollow fragility of someone who finally knew they were powerless. He stepped inside, through the same doorway where she once shoved him out like a stray. Now he entered as the rightful master. The caretaker bowed deeply. "Welcome home, sir." The woman's breath caught. That one sentence shattered the last piece of her pride. She stepped forward shakily. "So this is it." He nodded. "Yes." Her voice quivered. "It feels different seeing you walk through that door." He didn't answer.
He didn't need to.
The symbolism was loud enough. She swallowed hard. "Do you feel victorious?" He shook his head.
No.
This was never about winning. She looked down. "But I lost everything." "You lost what was never yours," he said calmly. "And I gained what should have always been mine." There was no triumph in his tone, only closure. The staff watched quietly from a distance, their eyes filled with respect. Not for her.
For him.
For the rightful heir who had endured humiliation without ever exposing his truth. She lifted her suitcase with trembling hands. May I say something before I go?" He nodded once. She looked around the mansion like she was seeing it for the first time, not as her kingdom, but as borrowed beauty. "I didn't realize how small I was making myself," she whispered. "I thought power came from owning everything. But maybe it comes from being the kind of person who doesn't need to." He listened without interrupting. "I hope," she said, voice cracking, "that you take care of this place better than I did. Better than I ever could." He met her gaze. "I will." She blinked rapidly, fighting tears. Then she whispered the one thing she never imagined saying to him. "I'm sorry." He nodded, not forgiving her, not condemning her, just acknowledging the truth finally spoken. She turned and walked past him, out the door, down the steps, carrying nothing but the consequences of her own choices. The door closed gently behind her. He stood alone in the grand foyer, the morning light warming the marble floor beneath his feet. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like an outsider. For the first time, the mansion felt like home.